Hi. Today I wanted to talk about something that I think is very important, and it is about how to learn the hardest languages in the world. Um, have you ever asked yourself and told yourself that you didn't want to learn that language because you heard it was too difficult? Maybe you wanted to learn Hungarian and you heard it's impossible to learn, or Mandarin Chinese, or Polish. Uh, it happened to me quite a few times. For example, 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, I asked my aunt what she thought about Mandarin Chinese. She also is a language lover. And she told me it's impossible to learn. It's so challenging, all these characters and tones, it's impossible. Just, don't even start. And that actually kept me from learning Mandarin Chinese for years and years. And the same thing happened, for example, for Polish or for Hungarian. Now, I think that what I did wrong is to believe in what people said, um, and they themselves don't even, that was based on their perception of difficulty. And my aunt, to tell the truth, didn't even know Mandarin Chinese. So I think that in this regard, we shouldn't talk about difficulty because difficulty is something that is subjective. All languages can be easy, all languages can be difficult, depending on who talks. For example, I saw in one of the comments on YouTube that somebody said that Japanese is so easy, but for me, it's like the most challenging language I've ever heard so far. So everything is relative and subjective. I think a more objective term is complexity. Because languages are complex systems. Like an airplane is a complex system in the sense that it's made of smaller and simpler parts. The same goes for a car. And the language is exactly the same. It's made of many subparts. Now, all languages are related in a way, in the sense that they're all made of subparts like phonetics, grammar, etc., etc. And the thing is that we shouldn't talk about difficulty and we shouldn't talk about complexity because, once again, we manage complex systems every single day. The mere fact that I'm speaking is a complex procedure per se. The fact that we're driving a car, we're swimming, we're walking, they're all complex things that we do naturally. And language learning is no exception. So I would rather talk about language or linguistic distance between languages, in the sense that languages can be closer or can be not so close or distant, depending on how much the subparts of the languages overlap. Let me give you an example. Italian and Spanish are close languages, or are considered close languages, because many of their respective subparts overlap. For example, Italian and Spanish overlap in terms of pronunciation, in terms of grammar, because we form sentences in a very similar way, in a very similar order, and in culture. But Italian and Japanese are quite distant because even though, Italian and Japanese are close in terms of pronunciation because they don't have that many sounds and they share quite a few sounds. The fact is that in the end, they're distant because of the culture, because of the way they form sentences. So it's important to talk in terms of distance, and I'm going to base my next what I'm going to say next, and my tips, so to say, based on this concept of distance. Let me give you an example. It's very important when you decide to learn a language, a distant language, so to say, to know where you're going. In this regard, what you have to do is, and it's paramount, is to check your assumptions. When people say this is impossible to learn, remember, this is their perception of difficulty. This is what they think. Something that is difficult for them might not be difficult for you. So there's a bunch of things in which we believe that are actually not true, but that we heard so many times that we take for granted. And getting rid of that and listen to your inner voice is the very first step towards this journey. Then the second very important step is to actually figure out why you're learning a language. It is absolutely paramount that you understand why you're doing something. And you don't have to base it on hearsay. Something like, hey, it's cool to learn Spanish, so let me give it a try. Or I heard that it's cool to speak this language and you want to speak it because it's cool in general. Or that a lot of people are learning it. It's fashionable. These are all extrinsic reasons. They come from outside. They're weak. And what is going to happen that in the long, either in the short or long term, probably more in the short term, you're going to give up because you're not supported by valid reasons. The reasons have to come from inside, and you have to think about them so that they drive. They're going to be your driving force. Something that comes from inside is the result of feelings that you develop when you have certain experiences. So if you can go to the country or get to know a native speaker, spend time with the culture of the language, read a book, get interested in it. That is what is going to to push you forward in the long term. And it's very, very important even before you start this journey. This is absolutely paramount. Tip number 3, or step number 3, is the fact that you have to plan your time. So planning your time first comes from deciding, having very clear short as long as long-term goals. Meaning, let's suppose that, for example, a native English speaker, could be you, want to learn German. Then let's say that you want to reach, in 2 years, you want to speak the language fluently. But then you have to think, once you have a long-term goal, you have to think about the short-term goal. What is your short-term goal in, for example, 6 months? What do you want to do with the language in 6 months? Let's suppose that you want to reach basic fluency in 6 months. Well, that means that you have a certain amount of time, 6 months, 180 days, to reach basic fluency in the language. So let's do the math. 180 days, and let's say that you need more or less 200 hours to reach fluency in, say, basic fluency in German. So it's more or less 1 hour a day. So the fact that you have a short-term goal just defines how much time you can spend daily. Once you know that, you can start planning. Say on Sunday, for example, you can tell yourself, you know what, I want to dedicate time to this, because time is not something you have or don't have. Time is something that you dedicate. You find the time to do something, and you start planning the week before, and you start saying, okay, I'm going to dedicate this amount of time every day, this time slot on Monday, this time slot on Tuesday, and so on. This is another very important thing, because if you don't plan, then on a day you say, okay, I've done a number of things, and let me do some German, and then you're tired and your energy is low, and you're not going to do that. And the fourth important thing is the how you're going there. Meaning you have to have a method. So that method is your means of transport. It could be an airplane. It can become an airplane if you know exactly what to do. And in terms of method, it is very important that your method is effective for you. There is no one best method in language learning. There's just the method or the methods that work for you. And to find it is a matter of trial and error. So if somebody says, try this, if you heard that it's cool, you try it, give it a try. If you don't like it, just take a step back and try something else until you find the thing that you like to do. This is absolutely important. And the method has to be enjoyable. You have to do things that you like. You're an independent language learner. Nobody forces you to do things that you don't want to do. So make sure that you enjoy every single thing that you do. And the third thing is that the method has to be flexible. In the case of distant languages, focus on the things that are the most challenging at first, because then things are going to get easier much faster down the line, easier and faster down the line. Meaning, for example, in Chinese, in Mandarin Chinese, what I did is I made sure that I focused on tones from the very beginning, because that was the most challenging part of the language, and then things got easier down the line because of this decision. And the fourth, and this is very important, and it's important that the method be flexible once again. So you have to know, to recap, you have to get rid of assumptions, you have to check your assumptions and get rid of rumors. Then you have to know why you want to learn the language. Then you have to understand how to learn the language, and then it's just a matter of covering the distance. It's not about difficulty anymore. It's not about time. It's not about distance. It's about your will to cover this path. So thanks for listening. And if you want, you can check the article it's quite lengthy, the article that I wrote on my blog. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you're going to have a bunch of things that you cannot see on YouTube. And they're all for free and sent to you. And I'm preparing a bunch of interesting things. So once again, thanks for listening. And the last question for you is, how far will you go in terms of language distance? Bye.